Alright, welcome back. The last video we was putting on the reinforcement tapes and talked about marking them and lining them out and putting a little bit of glue on the top of them. I didn't mention a lot of times it's good to let that glue get a little wide. So what I have done is poked the holes on each side of these marks, and when you put a little bit of a bed of thin glue, it causes that fabric, like I mentioned before, to kind of set. When you poke that hole with a needle, it just leaves a perfect round hole, where if you just poke this wrong fabric, it would kind of try to close up, because you're gonna be going in and out and finding these holes. This time I want to introduce my cousin Brian Stiching. We both own Central Arkansas Aircraft Repair. Like I mentioned in my first video, I farmed, was my main living up to this year, but I've restored planes for 25 plus years, and Brian along with me has been involved, and we started Central Arkansas some years back. He does most of the managing of the projects and stuff through Central Arkansas at this time, but like I mentioned, I'm going to introduce several different people through these videos that to do different parts, and just having someone up here besides looking at me every time. So with this being said, I'm going to let Brian go ahead and take over. I may kind of butt in a little if I see something that we might need to mention or something, but I'll let Brian go ahead and tell you what kind of knots, and we'll do 2 or 3 different views of these knots, and I'll let him go ahead and take over.
All right, hello everybody. My name is Brian Stiching. Like Robbie said, I work next door at Central Arkansas Aircraft Repair. That we specialize only in fabric airplane. Been doing it for close to 30 years now. You can check us out at centralarkansas.com, kind of see what goes on next door. We're going to talk about rib stitching today, and like Robbie said, we're going to give a couple of different views. We're going to show 2 different knots. One is called, or what we call, the Superflite knot. There are multiple videos already on YouTube. Superflite has a video that shows this knot, but we're just including this as it goes through the whole process of what we're doing. And the other knot is basically straight out of 4313, which is the modified seine knot. And the starter knots that start both knots are identical, and but we'll cover all of that. I usually keep a couple of stitching needles, and you'll see why in a minute. And we're using flat lacing cord. These knots work fine with round lacing cord. We like to use the flat because it just lays down flatter. You can tie a simple hitch knot on the end of when you thread it through, so you don't lose it. Me personally, I just like to run it through like that, and because if you need to take the needle off, sometimes you need to work a knot out. And we'll get started. We'll move this down here in the hollow place. For the first knot, or the starter knot, we'll be going down through the fabric, and we'll pick it up so I can find the hole. Like Robbie said, he's already pre-punched the holes. So we'll go through, come back up the other side. And you'll find that sometimes it helps, especially when you're doing a wing, to have a light on the floor, and it kind of illuminates the inside of it and helps you. So we've got our cord through it. And generally I'll run off a couple of arm lengths of cord, depending on the length of what you're doing. If you're doing a wing rib, you'll want probably a good 3 arm lengths of it, so you can make through the whole run without having to start over.
And if you do on a wing have a spot that you run out of cord, just do your final knot and then just start a new starter knot.
Exactly.
Because sometimes I had such long wings that you deal with so much cord. Sometimes I will do a partial and then start again, just to keep having to drag so much cord.
Just like you said, if you run out on this stitch right here, you just do the finish knot, tuck everything in, and just do a starter knot. You could actually do each stitch as the starter knot, just 1 stitch at a time. Takes a lot more time. The first thing we're going to do, you have your tail, you have your cord. We're going to tie what's basically a square knot. This is the way I do it. Different people tie square knots different ways. Right hand, left hand. Of course, you're looking at this backwards. We'll show it from the other view. I go right over left and left over right. And as you can see, that ties a square knot. I pull the knot down, pull it down snug, and then move the knot over to my left, because we're going to tie a half hitch knot on each side of this knot to hold it so it doesn't ever come untied. This is where the second needle comes in handy. The first knot, which is going to be on this side of the knot, I run the needle through, and it's going to loosen that knot a little bit, but it'll get tightened back up. And then we're using the tail, the short tail, and we will thread it just enough through the needle to hold it, and then pull it through. Now we've got it through. Now you can take this loop without pulling your tail back through, and you can snug this knot back down. And you're going to go through the hole, tie a half hitch knot, pulling the short tail to my left, cinch that knot down. Now we're going to move the whole knot over to this side, because at the end result, we're going to push all the knots off in the hole. We'll take the scissors and cut this tail about 1 inch. Now you take your needle with the long cord, you do the exact same thing. You go under the stitch, and you're coming up through the loop, and you tie a hitch knot and pull it over. Now you've essentially locked that square knot with a hitch knot on each side of it. Now we take the butt end of the needle, because it's nice and rounded, and it just takes a little finesse. You don't just want to jab and just start poking and enlarge that hole, but it'll just pop right through the hole. Like Robbie said, that thin glue that we put down makes the needle poke a nice round hole in the fabric, and it doesn't try to fray and enlarge the hole. So we poke the knot through, and it pops through, and then using the needle in your finger, you just poke the tail right through there. So that's our starter knot.
One little spot here to mention. Explain to them why we do the knots like this, so that the beginner can't understand. Why he don't think, well, I just tie this. Why don't I just do this and stitch it all the way across? Explain to him why you do this.
The theory behind this that was came up with by people a long time ago, a lot smarter than us. The reason to do these knots in the specific way that's laid out in the 4313, and there are multiple knots, several different knots. Generally, faster airplanes, in the real high speed range, they sometimes double up on looping and wrapping. Essentially, the basic premise is just like this starter knot, you've got a hitch knot on each side of it so that it doesn't come untied. The next knot is the same way. The way the knot's tied, it's not prone to come untied, but they're all linked together so that if you had a cord like in a wing, and if for some reason it chafed on something, and over time one of those vertical cords fractured, broke, and that stitch would come loose. I mean, that actually would be broken. Of course, it's under the tape. Nothing's going to come loose. But that one being loose, none of the rest of these will come untied. They're each an independent knot, but they're linked together. And that way, so if you have one stitch break, you don't have all of your knots loose, which would obviously mean your fabric could come loose and start flopping.
And one other thing, and it's not considered a way to get by with that. Once we're done with all this gets glue on it and glued down around that knot, and everything really gets locked in. But that's not an excuse to say that you don't do it this other way, because when we lock each one of these knots down, there's going to get glue all over that knot and everything. They just, I've tore a lot of wings apart, and I've never had one act like it's wanting to slide or move or anything because of all. And
most all of the stitching cord that we use nowadays, this being the flat, like I said, they make a round. It has a wax coating on it. There's a fungicide in that wax to help to keep this cord from deteriorating. But that wax also kind of makes it a little grippy, so that when you tie a knot and you tighten the knot up, that wax kind of helps hold the knot too. So it's not prone to loosen the knot up. So, when you get a new roll of stitching cord, it's going to be waxy. And usually what you do is, after all of your stitching's done, and we'll get to this, you're going to take an iron and dress up your stitches, but recommend take some fabric wash and kind of wash the area to get that waxy build up, because sometimes when you pull these cords through, you'll see as it comes through the hole and in the hole, you'll see a little ball of wax that'll build up, and you want to get that off of there so that it doesn't have any adverse effects on your primers.
Customers will call me and ask me, well, why do you sell fabric wash? My stuff is clean. Well, that may be true, but if you stitched all day long on a wing, your hands has got this all over, and then you do this, and you do this. It's clean, but you just laid some wax or something down, and you know all painters know that they don't want car wax, they don't want any kind of stuff around in the room with them painting. So that's usually part of the reason you do all the wash down.
No silicones or wax. All that stuff interferes with the paint. Okay, we've got our starter knot done. We have the knot pushed off in the hole. Now we're going to go into the fabric with our needle, and we're going to find the next hole and come out. The curved tip on this needle, some needles that are sold here are straight needles, some are curved tip. You can take a straight needle, and if you're careful with a pair of pliers and put a curve in it, they are hardened. If you bend them too hard, they will snap, but that's what that little curve allows for, is you to help find that hole. We pull our cord through.
This particular job could be done with a needle this long, but that one's long enough to go through wings and everything.
Now we come out of this hole. Our trailer is running under the fabric, so it's all hidden. We go back down through the opposite side. And you have to twist your needle and find your hole. Then we come back up through this side, and we don't want to pull it all the way down. We want to leave a loop up here. We come back up through this hole, and when you pull it down till you're about 4 inches or so above the fabric. Now what you're going to do now is you're going to hold this loop up. You're going to rotate, pinch it in the middle. You're going to rotate the top half of the loop clockwise. Always remember clockwise. And so essentially you're making a figure 8. After you've done that, you come back towards you through the top loop. Then turn and go away from you under this crossover, which is under my fingers, away from you in the bottom. Now you start pulling the knot down, and you can see it tightening up. Once you get it down close like that, you can grip it and pull it over to this side and pull it back, and you can feel the knot getting tighter, and you can see your trailers getting tighter. Usually a couple of times does it. You don't want to go too hard because you can actually rip out into this fabric. You heard that little pop. That was actually the knot popping under the fabric. Sometimes it doesn't, and you just have to take the butt end of the needle and push the knot through there. But sometimes it pops about halfway through there. But this loop that's around this rib will rotate around it. It's not too tight that it won't rotate, so we'll just finish pushing that knot through there. Now that knot is off in there. That knot is tied. So now we'll go same thing. We'll go under the fabric.
Just one thing I thought of right then for the beginner guys, when he was pushing that knot in there, this has happened to me before. You're pushing, it slips off the knot, and all of a sudden your needle pushes in and it rips a hole out here 1/2 inch. It's not the end of the world. You're going to have a tape over this, you know. You don't want that, but it's fine. I mean, you know, that one little rip, there's no need of a repair because you're going to have a tape go over. Now, if you was to come on out here and rip, you might need to do. You could even do an extra piece on here and really iron the edges down. And when you're priming, do a little heavier priming here. There's ways. I'll show a video on repairs of actual painted products. But you know, when you're doing, I just noticed when he was doing that, it just reminded me it's happened to me before. Pushing, all of a sudden it slipped.
As long as you're inside that tape line, once that tape gets glued down on there, that little 1/2 inch tear will disappear. You'll never know it's there. But he made a good point. The seconite is a very tough fabric. You can't tear it or rip it by hand. But once you have a hole in it with something like a needle, even that's rounded, not necessarily a razor blade or anything, you know, just like I said earlier, even pulling that cord, it will rip a nice straight line. It will rip the fabric. Okay, we've came under the fabric, we've came out the hole. Now we're going same thing through the opposite side. We've got to twist the needle to find our hole.
That's usually the downfall of having a little curve. A straight needle, you'd find it real easy, but without the curve, it's hard to get back under there and up out of the
But
hole.
there are situations with odd shaped ribs. Sometimes there may be a brace that runs an angle brace like a drag wire in a wing, and you're needing to be on a particular side of it, and that curve comes in helpful because you can turn the curve and get it started behind it, then turn the curve the other way and come straight up through the hole. So there's give and take on both of them. Okay, once again, we come through, leave us about 4 inches or so of loop. We go pinch it in the middle and go clockwise, let it cross, and then pinch where that cross is at. That's just an easy way so that you don't foul it up. Come towards you through the top loop with the needle, then turn and go away from you through the bottom loop. Pull your needle all the way through, set it aside. You've got your string, you start pulling the knot down. You can see the knot tightening up. Once it gets about 1/8 of an inch or so, then you bring it over and back a couple of times, and that helps suck that knot right off into that hole. That one actually sucked off in there. Quite nice. Okay, now we're ready to go to the next one. As you can see, we've changed camera angles to give you a point of view perspective, so like what you're looking at, because it is hard to learn stuff when you're looking from the opposite direction. So once again, we're going back under the fabric to the next pre-punched hole. And you just, sometimes it'll kind of want to hang on something. You just give it a little tug. You can see the trailer under the fabric, under there. Now we're going to go through, which this is pretty self-explanatory. Just go through, you're going to find your other hole on the bottom. You're going to come back up through this hole. Once again, we've got about 4 inches, 3 to 4 inches of stitch there. We're going to turn it clockwise, making a figure 8 essentially. Pinch it right at the center part of it. Come towards you through the top loop, away from you in the bottom loop. Let the knot work down to about 1/8 of an inch, then work it side to side a couple of times. The last one, snugging on it pretty good, and that works the knot right over there in the hole. Then if the knot's not all the way in, you just give it just a little help. Now it's pushed right off in the hole. Now we're going to our last stitch. Through the fabric. I'll let Robbie, since he's on that side, he can punch us through.
That'd be $5.
All right, now we've got about, sometimes when you're getting toward the end of the stitch, you're using your cord up. Usually the shorter needles help with this. If your loop is down like this and you're just doesn't have enough slack, that's still fine. You do the same thing. We do our figure 8 clockwise through towards you, away from you on the bottom loop. Pull it through, work it to the left a couple of times, and pop it over. Now for the ending knot, we're gonna put a half hitch knot against this knot to hold it. So this first knot is locked in with one on each side. Obviously we can't do one on the other side because it's already in there. Same thing as the starter knot. Doesn't matter which direction you go through. Go under the cord and through your loop and just tie a simple half hitch knot. Pull it over and take your scissors. Leave yourself about a 1-inch tail because you don't want to cut it down real close to the knot. I mean, it could be a 1/2 inch, it could be 3/4. You know, you want enough tail out there that you don't have it. If it's up close to the knot, it could possibly start to work its way back out and untie. Push your knot over in there. Push the tail with your finger and then like that. Now, everything is hidden. All of the knots have worked off in there. All your stitches are using this flat cord. They're all nice and flat. Sometimes if you get a twist in it, you'll have a twist right in the middle of it. And this is a tip from Bill Rusk. He takes the needle. You can take that needle and work that cord like that, and it will work that twist over toward the hole. That's a nice tip from him that he figured out. And to do that, of course, we'll come back with an iron, and you can the heat will actually help flatten these out and smooth them up before we put our tapes on.
All right, welcome back to this part. Second part, he's just going to show the modified seine knot. And I'm just going to say a little disclaimer here. I know that these videos kind of run out long, but I'm hoping that these videos are for the very, very beginner building his Kit Fox, his Afforder Plane, or his Carbon Cub. It doesn't matter. And, you know, like I said in the very first introductory video, I would love for someone that's been doing it for 30 years to find something that we found out in the last 25, 30 years that they can use that would help or whatever, because I even find out stuff on a weekly basis. So some of these are a little long, but they're really based for the very beginner that wants to know why. And he's been around this stuff, but he's been not too scared, but, you know, well, why is it knotted that way or something? That's the only reason we're kind of taking the extra time. There's many videos out there. Superflite has some great ones. Stitch has some great ones that shows all the knots and stuff, and they're a lot better production than ours. We don't talk. We're not clean cut and anything around here. This is basically for instructional videos. So he'll go ahead and show this final knot.
Okay, we're going to do the modified seine knot now, which is the knot that is straight out of the AC 4013, which is the Mechanics Bible that the FAA has provided for us. This knot takes just a tad longer to tie and to do a running set of stitches than this knot does. We use both knots. I don't have any reason why we use one for this or one for that. It just boils down to whatever mood we're in. The Superflite knot, or what we call the Superflite knot, because we learned it out of the Superflite book. Out of their manual, is a little faster. The starting knots for both types are identical. So I won't spend a lot of time. We'll just go on and get the starter knot done, because we've covered that in the first half of the video. But I will talk through it and walk through it, but we're not going to stop and really explain it. But it is identical to the other one. And then we've only got 3 stitches on this rib, so we're going to do one from this camera perspective. Then we'll move the camera around and show the perspective like you would be looking at the stitch if you were doing it. So like I said, the starter knot's the same. Right over left. Left over right. Ties a square knot. Pull it down tight. Pull the knot over to my left. Take my second needle, just so I don't have to unthread that one. Run it under. Take my short tail and thread it through the needle. This is just a little trick to help you do it. So now you've got it under there. Now you can go back, cinch that knot back down, come through the loop, tie your half hitch, pull them in opposite directions to cinch that knot down. Now pull it over to our hole that it's eventually going to end up in. Take the needle that has your long end of your cord on it, go through your loop. I've unthreaded my needle. Tie your second half hitch knot work it over to the hole. Take our scissors, cut the excess off. Now we take and work that knot right through the hole in the tail. So that's essentially the exact same knot that we started on the other rib. Now the next knot is where the difference comes in. We still go under the fabric, come out the next hole. Now here's where we run into the first difference. Instead of crossing over and going down this side, we came out of this hole, we're going to put the needle right back through this hole. We came here and came out, so that's our trailer. Now we're going to go through the same hole and go out the bottom. That's the first difference. All right, now I'm just going to stick the point of this needle in here just so I've got it started. Once we get it to that point, you're gonna, and you can pull your cord through so that you make this loop bigger. All right, you've got two cords here. One of them pulls easy. The other one is from your trailer, is hard. The one that moves easy you want facing towards you. The one that doesn't pull facing away from you. So you've just got a big loop like that. This is the one that you can pull, and that's actually making your loop bigger. You can grab the bottom and make it smaller. Now we go on and bring our needle through, and there's all kinds of little rhymes and stories that go along this. This is the island, this is the palm tree. They are good memory terms to do it. Some of the other YouTube videos explain that to you. I'm just going to give it in the bare bones. We bring our needle through. Now we're starting to close the loop up. So we're going to close the loop up. And this is the cord that's coming through. This is one that's attached to your needle. You're going to hold it out here, and you're going to make essentially, which looks like a kind of a little triangle loop. You've got the loop. This cord goes over that. This is the one that's coming through. You're going to hold this with your fingers. You can put your finger right on that junction and hold that loop open. Now, we're going to take our needle and we're going to go under this string, under it. We're going to go up to this crossover string, and this is where the curve in the needle helps. We're going to go over this string, but we're going to rotate our needle and go under that one. Now we're going to go over this one to our left, and we're going to pull our needle through, pull our cord through. Actually, let me back that up, and I'll show you a little trick that will help you ensure that you have done everything correctly. Before you pull your needle through, make sure I go back where I'm supposed to. If you pull this cord, get the tail out there. Once you've got under, over, and back over, if you pull this cord, you will get a little X, a figure 8 laying on its side, or an X. It should look like that. That lets you know that you've done everything correctly. And it doesn't hurt. You can pull that down, just snug it. You can see your X there. Keep hold of this one, pull your needle through. Once you pull the needle through, you want to keep your fingers on this one. You don't want to let go of it. You pull this loop through until you get, something like this size. Because now you're going to grab this one that you've been holding on to the whole time, and you're going to pull it up, and then you're going to work it side to side, just like the other knot. Pull it to the left, pull it back to the right. Now you've got this loop here. The knot is tight, but it's not complete. Once you've got it cinched over and it's tightened up, now you take your long cord that's attached to your needle, you hold your finger right on that, and you pull and tighten that up. And most of the time that knot will start over into the hole, or that's helping it pop over into that hole. If it's not completely in there, you just massage it a little bit, and now the knot's through the hole. Now we're going to change camera angles to, okay, now we're getting the camera perspective of what you'll be seeing. We've tied the knot's over in the hole. Once again, same routine, under the fabric. Pull it through, snug it.
Go back through the same hole.
My mistake, yeah. Once again, we go back through the same hole.
You'll get a routine of a knot and you'll end up doing it in your sleep.
We pull it through to a loop about that size. Sometimes you just have to flop it around. Remember, the one that you can move is facing towards you, back towards you, the other one like that. So you've got a nice loop like that. I'll let Robbie push through so we don't have to pick it up and lose our...
And I didn't get paid last time, so...
So now we come back up through. We start pulling the knot, and the knot will naturally rotate around. So now we're back to our triangle loop. So you can hold on to this one with your thumb. We're going to go under the first one, over the second one, rotate our needle, and go under it, and then out over the last one. When the needle's in there, you pull it tight. You can see the X. Now at this point, you're going to keep your hand on this one, pull your needle through, get the slack up. You're down to about a 4-inch loop there. Now you're going to pull up and over, and tighten that up. Then you're going to put your finger on the knot, and you're going to finish the knot, push it over in the hole, like so. Now, this is the last stitch, so we're going to end it just like we did over here. We're going to go under the stitch, through the loop, with a simple half-hitch knot. Work it over. It pops right down in the hole. We take our scissors, cut it off.
One little trick that I learned, instead of trying to poke all this down in there, a lot of times you can thread this and use that to poke it down in there. Now, if the hole's not big enough, you can't go in it, but you can do that and poke it, and it's all in there all at once.
Yeah, good tip. A little different way of doing it. Probably works better than the way I do it.
All right, that completes the stitching part. One thing I want to kind of add to this for your beginners, when we mentioned about that spacing early on when I was marking them in the other video about looking at your 4313 or your manual of building the plane, when it talks about the spacing and the speed of the airplane, don't forget that there's also spacing that's in your prop wash. That's the few ribs that's up close to the plane that's taking a more abuse from your propeller. Those usually will be just about twice as close, or whatever the book will call for it. And we didn't have, one thing, we'll probably do some more on doing a wing, but you didn't have a problem with this, but a wing you'll really have a problem. When you do a full wing that's that long and you got a lot of cord, you may be pulling 7, 8 foot, 9 foot of cord through there. Make sure your floor is clean, and everything. So there's nothing worse than you have spent an hour going through one rib and you got everything stitched, and you get removed and you look under there and you found out that you've stitched the sawhorse to the wing, or you've stitched a big old wad of fabric and you pulled it up the wing and didn't know it. So keep your floor clean underneath, because when you're pulling that cord back through, it'll grab everything and suck it up to your wing, and you won't notice it till you're done.